In the 11th century, the Scottish king Malcolm Canmore began to introduce the Norman style of feudalism into Scotland. This process continued into the 12th century, by which time it was firmly established. Part of this system was justice at the local level, apart from crimes such as murder, treason and rape. Here there would be a requirement for a Gallows Hill, a Court Hill and a Drowning Pit, and there would be court officials such as the Baron Bailey, who basically stood in for the Baron himself, the Dempster, who announced the doom, that is the sentence, and other court officials. The baronial courts met at very prominent locations. These would be either artificial or there would be natural structures adapted for the purpose. The name Moot means meeting place, same root origin as the Gaelic mod. Other names used were Court Hill, Judges Hill, Hill of Judgment, and Justice Hill. In order to gather together all those required for baronial court, they were often signalled in advance by either having flags flying or by having bonfires. There are a couple of examples of borestone sites close to old Moot Hills. This would be where a hole was drilled into the ground into which the flagpole base was placed. In legal terms, the Baron's powers are encompassed by the legal term pit and gallows, sake and soak, toll, team, and ingfang fief. Basically, this was a description of the powers that he held and were exercised at the baronial court. The records of some of these baronial courts still survive. Most of the cases were very trivial, but the Baron also had the right of capital punishment, that is, the Gallows Hill upon which men were hung, and a drowning pit or murder hole in which the women were drowned. Drowning was regarded as a less physically violent death. A number of the court hills seem to have doubled as Gallows Hills, and the name Gallows Hill is quite a common place name. Often you find when a gallows or court hills is located and survives that nearby is a body of water, either a marsh, a wetland of some sort, or a river. This would be where the drowning pit was located. Bones have often been found close to old court hills, Gallows Hills, and drowning pits, showing that the people concerned were not buried in hallowed ground. Not all baronies came into existence at the same time, and it's thought that some of them used the old mots, as in mott and baileys, from old castles that had been abandoned. Also, some baronies became more powerful. They were known as regalities. A good example is the Court Hill near Beath, which was used by the monks from Kilwinning Abbey. Baronial courts were abolished in 1747, following the 1745 Jacobite rebellion. It was decided that the existence of this system of feudalism gave the local barons far too much control and influence over those living within the barony. In later times, the courts had mostly abandoned the Moot Hills and had moved instead into the tower castles or fortified mansions of the barons. However, the Gallows Hills and the drowning pits continued to be used. In particular, the prominent Gallows Hills was a sign that justice was being done and was a warning to those passing by. After 1747, the Moot Hills ceased to have a function. Many were ploughed out by the farmers, and nothing remains of them. Others were converted to kilns, either kilns for drying corn or as lime kilns. And there's one example at Knockanlaw near Kilmarnock, where one had a powder magazine built into it. Where place name evidence is lacking, it would be difficult to identify the Moot Hills and the Gallows Hills of an old barony. They can be easily confused with old burial mounds or with other structures such as natural features or even mottes from modern baileys. The feudal system could be very much open to abuse, particularly the baron baileys, a number of which have stories relating to them to show their corruption. They were the second most powerful person in a barony apart from the baron himself. There's even an example of an English visitor who, upon hearing the power of the baron bailey, was exposed to an innocent person being hung just for the baron bailey to show off the power that he had. The old Moot Hill at Girvan once stood beside the river. It's been levelled now. However, a stone has been placed in the nearby Knockcushion house within the gardens. This commemorates the fact that unusually there was a debtor's stone here. If a debtor reached the stone, he was safe from being jailed. The remains of the old toll booth or jail stand down beside the main street. An artificial mound stands on Cannock's Moss in Ayrshire, an obvious site for being a moss for a drowning pit, and the likely function as a moat hill is that nearby there's the Galloway Ford, that is the site where the baronial gallows once stood. Bowie's Munt stands in East Ayrshire at Canmores. It's also known as Knock Dolan. The term knock is often used as a word meaning the original site of something like a hill fort. So this may have been later used for the Hill of Justice. Judges Hill stands in the Irvine Valley, close to Galston. It's very close to the original site of the old Loudon Castle, that is the one prior to the present ruined Loudon Castle. Craig Law in Ayrshire, close to the Renfrewshire boundary, not far from Lugton, is another site where there was a Moot Hill. Here there was also a boarstone, and at one time there was a stone circle on the top of the prominence. The so-called Hill of Judgment at Riccarton on the edge of Kilmarnock is an interesting site. Here, the prominent Moot Hill had a church built on top. The Whin Hill in Ayrshire, not far from Auchenharvie Castle, is the likely site of the old Gallows Hill for the barony of Bonshaw. The Moot Hill itself lies just down below in the valley. A Gallows Hill survives as a place name on the edge of Thornhill, with the possible site of a drowning pit nearby. A Gallows Hill also survives up near Stonehaven at Dunnottar. In some ways, these Moot Hills were the natural successors to the meeting sites such as the wood henges and stone circles of prehistoric times.